This is the next video in the series of biology revision videos for Unit 4. This video is looking at plant minerals, the process of decay and ways of preventing decay. So the first part that we're going to look at is plant minerals. Now these are needed by the plant in order to remain healthy. They're needed to be able to make organic molecules within the plant, and if they do not get adequate amounts then they will start to show deficiency symptoms. Now, if plants are not growing well and it becomes quite obvious to people that grow plants such as gardeners, now they may add manure or chemical fertilisers to the soil which will be broken down and slowly release minerals. And although it's not mentioned here, they can also add compost, rotting leaves, rotting vegetation, things like that, and that will also decay and release the minerals into the soil. So we're now going to look at different minerals that the plants need in order to stay healthy. There are 4 that you need to know about: nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium and magnesium. On this slide we'll look at nitrogen and phosphorus. Now if we start with nitrogen, we find nitrogen in nitrates dissolved in the soil water, and they're needed in the plant to make amino acids which are then used to build proteins. Now you should already know that proteins are used for growth, so they will use the proteins for repairing and growing new cells. Now, if they do not get enough nitrogen and the soil is low in nitrates, then the plant will grow very poorly and we will get yellow leaves, as we can see here. Now here we've got phosphorus, which contained in phosphates within the soil. Now this is needed to make ATP, which is the energy storing molecule in respiration. Now they need this to undergo growth, and phosphates are needed for that process. They're also needed to make DNA for the sugar phosphate backbone and to also make molecules within the cell membrane. Now if there is not enough of this within the soil, the plant will suffer from poor root growth, which we can see in this picture here. It doesn't grow very well and we'll get discoloured purple leaves as a result of this. So next we'll look at the mineral potassium. Now that's needed for enzymes to work efficiently, and plants will need enzymes for photosynthesis and respiration. Now without it, there is not enough food and energy for flowers and fruit to grow, so we'll get poor flower growth and poor fruit growth, and as well as this we'll get yellow leaves with brown spots on them. With magnesium, that's needed to make chlorophyll, which is obviously needed in the process of photosynthesis. Now if there's not enough magnesium, we'll tend to get green leaves towards the top of the plant and yellow leaves towards the bottom, as they are saving any magnesium that the plant may have to make the chlorophyll in the top of the leaves to get most of the sunlight. Now as a farmer or a gardener, if you're wanting to add fertiliser to your soil, then they would list on the fertiliser the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, which is the NPK ratio. N meaning nitrogen, P meaning phosphorus, K meaning potassium. Now different fertilisers will have varying amounts of each of these minerals within them. High nitrogen fertilisers are used to promote leaf growth, while high potassium fertilisers promote flowering, as we can see here, that if we have more potassium we will get good flower and fruit growth. You will now be aware of diffusion on osmosis, where the particles will go from a high concentration area to a low concentration. Now in this situation, plant cells may have a higher concentration of minerals than the soil. So imagine here is the soil with a potassium ion, and here's the inside of the cell. So there's going to be lots of potassium in here and not as many out here. However, they cannot move by diffusion because that's against the concentration gradient, and that's not how diffusion works. Instead, active transport pumps particles against the concentration gradient, so from a low concentration to a high concentration. But to be able to do that, it has to use this, a carrier protein within the cell membrane. Now, the reason that it needs energy is that as the potassium particle will attach to the carrier protein. The carrier protein uses the ATP molecule, which is the energy molecule, and it causes the protein to change shape. This will then allow the particle of potassium to be released inside of the cell. Now we're going to look at decay, and what you will probably remember from Unit 2 biology is that elements within the living and non-living world are recycled, such as carbon and nitrogen. So here we can see that elements within the environment are absorbed by living things in different ways. They decay and are broken down to release those elements back into the environment. At this stage, these elements are then available again for other living things, such as plants, for example, to use in their organic molecules. Now, this recycling doesn't happen on its own. It happens by certain microbes that will break down the dead organic material after it's died. Now, these organisms, these microbes that are involved in this, are bacteria and fungi. Now, as well as this being essential to life on Earth, this recycling of nutrients to become available again after death, it's also useful to humans in agriculture and industry. So an example here is of a compost bin. Now, farmers, gardeners will use these. They will put dead plant material, such as grass cuttings from mowing lawns, leaves, twigs, things like that. Put them into this compost bin, allow them to decay, and then you'll have a nutrient-rich soil that can be used to put on other soil to grow plants. Now here is a picture of a sewage works, and bacteria, microbes such as bacteria and fungi are used in these places where sewage from homes and factories, offices are sent to be treated. Now bacteria will digest organic waste in these large tanks that we can see here. And this will make the sewage clean enough to put into waterways such as rivers. Now the way that this happens is that you have lots and lots of pebbles and rocks throughout this pool. Okay, so it looks something like this. So the sewage is sprinkled along the tank on the top by this arm here. So this arm travels around in a circle and sprays the tank with the sewage. Now that will trickle down through these rocks, and on the outside of these rocks will be a film of bacteria, and as it trickles down, the bacteria will digest the sewage and make that safe to be discharged. Now, although decay happens at all times of the year, at certain times of the year it will happen faster. Now, this is when conditions for bacteria and fungi are optimum for their survival. So the main conditions that you need to look at when it comes to bacteria and fungi are the temperature, the amount of oxygen, and the amount of water. So here we can see the effect of temperature is that when it's warmer, the rate of decay is faster. This is because microbes can respire faster. That's a chemical reaction. When it's warmer, chemical reactions happen faster. So they can grow and reproduce quicker when it's warmer. Here we've got more oxygen, we get a faster rate of decay. That enables the microbes to have a faster rate of respiration, which will again allow them to grow quickly and reproduce faster. And lastly, in moist conditions, decay happens faster because they need water to remain healthy. In moist conditions, they will grow faster and reproduce more. So we now know that bacteria and fungi are responsible for breaking down dead organic material, but they're not the only things that will do that. Now, bacteria and fungi come under this title as decomposers, but there are also detritivores. Now we're going to look at what these differences are. Now, detritivores include insects such as earthworms, millipedes, maggots, things like that. They eat and digest really small parts of dead material that are found within the soil. They then digest it, release the waste elsewhere in the soil. Due to this digestion of the dead organic material in the soil, that increases the surface area for decomposers such as bacteria and fungi to act on. Now, decomposers, as we can see here, chemically break down dead material. so they don't digest it in the way that detritivores do. Now, as they chemically break it down, they release ammonia into the soil. Now, most decomposers are what we call saprophytes. This is a key word, you need to know what it is, especially for the higher paper. Now, saprophytes feed on dead plants and animals, and they do this by secreting or releasing enzymes. Now, that is outside of their cells, so they release it outside. The enzymes digest the organic material outside of the cell, and then they can absorb those digested chemicals into the cell. Now, this is called extracellular digestion. The extra means outside of the cell, so extra outside cellular of the cell. Now, this whole process here of releasing enzymes, breaking it down and absorbing it back into the cell is what we call saprotrophic feeding. Now, as useful as decay can be to us when it comes to sewage and compost, it can also be quite a bit of a pain. This is because they can decompose and decay food. Now, there are issues with this. So, the decay of food in some areas can lead to food shortages, and that can lead to starvation and malnutrition. Also, to eat this food that is decaying could lead to an illness directly from eating it. And as an indirect consequence, if the food goes off and you're a farmer or you're selling it in a supermarket, then you are going to lose profit from food decaying. So over time, humans have come up with ways of preventing microbes from spoiling food. Now that's what we're going to go through now, some of the different methods. So first of all, we've got canning of foods, where food is sealed in a metal container. Now, it's heated to make it kill any microbes that may be present, and the canning itself, once sealed, will prevent any oxygen from getting in and any decomposer microbes getting in as well. Now, in the cooling method, we refrigerate the food, and it's typically kept at 4 degrees. Now, being at this temperature reduces the rate of reproduction in decomposers, so it slows down the rate of decay. And freezing has a similar principle, where that is kept at a lower temperature, about -5, and at this temperature it doesn't just slow down reproduction, it stops them altogether. Food can be dried, such as pastas, so without water decomposers will not be able to grow and reproduce, so that is vital for healthy growth. We can add salt to food. This has been done for centuries, where salt is added. That draws the water out of the microbes by the process of osmosis. Obviously, you'll know if there's more salt on the outside, that's a low water concentration, so the water will be drawn out of the cell, and that will kill the cell. Now, by adding sugar, that has a similar effect, in that the sugar outside will make the water concentration low. That will cause the water to go outside of the cell and will kill the microbes. Adding vinegar will kill the microbes straight out, so that will prevent anything from growing in the food that is being pickled. And that concludes this video looking at plant minerals, decay and preventing decay in food.